The night was still, the air heavy with the sound of crickets, but my heart wasn't still. It was racing, pounding so hard in my chest that I could barely breathe. I stood by the window, clutching the curtain with shaking hands, staring at the red and blue flashes that lit up the quiet neighborhood. My son was only 10 years old, sound asleep in his bed, his favorite stuffed bear tucked under his arm, completely unaware that men outside, men with badges and guns, were waiting to drag him away. My only child, my world, and they were here. Because of the HOA, I never thought moving into this perfect community would destroy our peace like this. We bought the house 3 years ago, believing the promises of safety, quiet, and neighborly smiles. What they didn't tell us was that the HOA board wasn't just strict, was ruthless. Fines for leaving a trash can out too long. Letters for letting our dog bark. Complaints about unsightly toys in the yard. But when the president of the HOA, a bitter woman named Karen Blake, decided my son playing basketball in the driveway was against community image, things escalated. She saw him as nothing more than a nuisance. And when we refused to pay her ridiculous fines or bow to her threats, she found a darker way to get at us. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass as the police lights grew brighter. They weren't here for a noise complaint. They weren't here to check on safety. They were here because Karen had called them, spinning lies that my son was being endangered in his own home. Kidnapping. That's what this was. Could barely keep my knees from buckling as I realized the horror. They wanted to take him away to make an example out of us. My boy, my sweet boy, was the pawn in her twisted game. My husband, David, wasn't home. He was still finishing his deployment overseas. A U.S. Marine commander, strong, fierce. A man who had faced war zones and chaos with unshakable courage. But here I was, alone, powerless, staring down the flashing lights of so-called protectors who had been manipulated by an HOA president drunk on power. My fingers dug into the curtain until my knuckles turned white. Fear mixed with rage. If David were here, none of this would be happening. But he wasn't, and I was terrified. I crept down the hall, each step heavy with dread, and pushed open my son's door. His chest rose and fell peacefully. His lashes curled against his cheeks. For a moment, I let myself memorize him, the warmth of his skin, the innocence of his sleep. Tears blurred my vision. How could I let them take him? What kind of mother would I be if I just stood back? A knock thundered at the front door, shaking the walls. My son stirred, rolling onto his side. My heart nearly stopped. Another knock, this. One louder, sharper. Open up, police department. The voice boomed through the night, rattling every bone in my body. I pressed a trembling finger to my lips, signaling my son to stay quiet as he blinked awake. He didn't understand. He couldn't. How could a child comprehend that neighbors, the same ones who smiled on the sidewalk, were plotting against him? I walked to the door on legs that felt like lead, my mind screaming at me to be strong. Through the peephole, I saw 2 uniformed officers, hands resting on their holsters. Behind them, Karen Blake stood with her arms crossed, smug satisfaction written across her face. My stomach churned with disgust. She wasn't even hiding it anymore. She wanted to see me break. She wanted to see me lose. Ma'am, we've received reports of neglect and unsafe conditions for your child, one officer said when I cracked the door. His tone was firm, but not cruel. He didn't see it. He didn't know. He thought he was protecting. My son's life was a lie written in Karen's reports, and they had believed her. I swallowed hard, tears slipping down my cheeks. Please, I whispered, my voice breaking. He's just a little boy. He's safe here. He's safe with me. My words felt useless. They didn't see the love in this home. They didn't see the bedtime stories, the meals, the laughter. all they saw were fabricated complaints and the twisted smile of a woman who craved control. Karen's voice cut in like a knife. She's lying. She's unstable. The boy doesn't belong here. My blood boiled as she leaned closer to the officers. If you don't remove him now, you're putting him at risk. I wanted to scream. I wanted to claw that smug look off her face. But I couldn't. I had to hold on for my son, for David, for myself. My son's small voice suddenly called from behind me, shaky and confused. Mom, what's going on? My chest tightened so painfully, I thought I would collapse. His innocence, his trust was all being torn apart by this nightmare. The officers exchanged glances. One of them shifted uncomfortably, as though he knew this didn't feel right. But the other reached for his radio. I panicked, pushing the door shut with all my strength, fumbling with the lock. My heart thundered so loudly I thought it would burst. I ran back to my son, scooping him into my arms. He clung to me, his small hands gripping my shirt. His voice trembled. Mom, are they going to take me away? That was the moment something inside me snapped. Fear turned to steel. Weakness turned to fire. They weren't going to take him. Not tonight, not ever. My husband might not be home yet, but his blood, his strength, his resilience, they flowed. In me too, I was the wife of a Marine commander. And no HOA, no corrupt cops. No bitter neighbor was going to rip my son from my arms. I grabbed my phone with one hand while holding him tight with the other. My fingers dialed before my mind even caught up. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then his voice came through the line, deep and steady, even from thousands of miles away. This is Commander Ashford. My throat closed with relief, with terror, with desperation. David, I whispered, my voice shaking but fierce. They're here. They're trying to take our son. Silence. Then the voice of a Marine commander. A father, a man who had faced hell itself and survived. Stay calm. Keep him close. I'm coming home. And God help them when I do. The pounding at the door grew louder. The lights outside blazed brighter. But for the first time that night, I felt hope spark inside me. They didn't know who they were dealing with. Not yet. The pounding on the door rattled the house like an earthquake. My son clung tighter to me, burying his face in my chest, his small body trembling. Every thud echoed through my bones, but David's voice still lingered in my ears like an anchor. Stay calm. Keep him close. I'm coming home. I didn't know how long it would take. Hours, days, maybe longer. But I held on to his promise like it was oxygen. Because right now, the people outside weren't neighbors or protectors. They were predators. And they were circling our home like vultures, ready to snatch the most precious part of me. The officers banged again. Ma'am, if you don't open this door, we'll be forced to enter by law. Their words boomed through the walls. I pressed. A shaky hand to my son's head, whispering, baby. It's going to be okay. Mommy's not letting them take you. But inside, panic clawed at me. Could they break in? Could they legally take him right out of my arms? Then I heard Karen's voice outside, smug and venomous. Do it. She's hiding him. This boy is in danger. Don't let her stall. My stomach turned. She wasn't just trying to scare me. She wanted to destroy me, piece by piece, starting with the one thing that gave me life, my child. My son lifted his head, his wide eyes glistening with tears. Mom, are they bad guys? His question pierced me. How could I explain this kind of evil to a child? How could I make him understand that sometimes the monsters didn't hide under the bed? They wore uniforms and smiles and lived right next. Door? Before I could answer, a loud crack jolted me. The sound of wood splintering filled the air. They were trying to force the door. My heart lurched. I bolted down the hall, clutching my son, and ducked into the basement. My breath came in shallow bursts, my ears straining for every sound. The basement smelled of concrete and dust. But it was the only place with no windows, just walls, shelves, and shadows. I crouched behind a stack of old boxes, holding him so tightly he could barely move. His tiny hands gripped my shirt like a lifeline. Above us, heavy boots thudded on the floor. Voices carried, "She's hiding him." Check the bedrooms. My blood ran cold. They were inside. I wanted to scream, to fight, to tear apart anyone who laid a hand on my boy, but I couldn't. Not yet. If I made a sound, they'd find us. I pressed a trembling finger to my son's lips, silently begging him to be brave. He nodded, though his eyes brimmed with fear. Seconds stretched into eternity. Every creak of the floorboards made me flinch. Then, faintly, I heard Karen's shrill voice echoing through the house. "Search everywhere. That child doesn't belong." To her anymore, my vision blurred with tears. Didn't belong to me. He was my flesh, my blood, my soul, walking around outside my body, and she thought she could strip him away like property. At that moment, I realized this wasn't just an HOA dispute anymore. This was war. The basement door creaked open. My breath hitched. A beam of light swept across the walls, closer and closer. My heart pounded so hard I thought they could hear it. My son pressed his face into my shoulder, trembling like a leaf. The flashlight beam lingered on the boxes just inches away. Then, footsteps retreated. The door closed. I didn't breathe until minutes later. When I finally exhaled, tears poured freely down my cheeks. My son's soft voice whispered against my neck, "Mom, I'm scared." I kissed the top of his head, my lips salty with tears. "I know, baby, but listen to me. You're safe with me. Nobody's going to take you away." Even as I said it, doubt clawed at me, but I couldn't let him see my fear. Not. When he needed my strength, we stayed hidden for what felt like hours. The stomping, the shouting, the chaos had eventually died down. Then came Karen's voice again, bitter with frustration. "Fine. If she wants to play games, she'll regret it. We'll get a court order. She can't hide forever." The sound of the front door slamming shut sent a wave of relief crashing over me. They were gone. For now, I climbed the basement steps, still clutching my son. My legs shook beneath me, every muscle tense. The house felt like a crime scene, doors ajar. Drawers opened, their presence lingering like poison in the air. I checked the locks again and again, even though I knew they could come back with more power next time. Later that night, after I finally tucked my son back into bed, I sat alone in the living room, phone in hand. My fingers hovered over David's number again and again. He had already promised he was coming, but part of me still needed to hear his voice. To hear him say it would be okay. To hear the commander, not just my husband. When he answered, I broke. My voice cracked, tears streaming down my face. "They came inside, David. They tried to take him." My breath hitched so violently I couldn't finish. His voice on the other end was low, steady, controlled. The voice of a man who had led Marines into battle. "Listen to me, Sarah. You did the right thing. You kept him safe. That's all that matters right now. But this ends. Do you understand? When I get home, this ends." Something inside me shifted then. The fear that had crippled me began to transform. His words ignited something fierce inside me, something I hadn't felt before. Hope, strength, rage. They had tried to rip apart a Marine commander's family, and they thought they'd get away with it. The fools. I wiped my tears and looked toward my son's bedroom, where his nightlight glowed faintly under the door. My hands clenched into fists. "Hurry home, David. I whispered to the dark. Because when you get here, they'll finally learn who they're messing with. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel powerless. I felt ready. Because this wasn't just about an HOA or Karen or even the police who had been duped into serving her lies. This was about a family. Our family. And no one, no board, no badge. No bitter neighbor was going to tear it apart, not while a Marine commander was on his way home. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the blinds like nothing had happened, but the house felt different. It felt violated. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, staring at the front door as if it might burst open again at any moment. My son padded in, wearing his pajamas, rubbing his sleepy eyes, clutching his bear. He looked so fragile, so unaware of how close he had come to being torn from me. "Mom, are they coming back?" His little voice cracked as he climbed into my lap. I pulled him close, pressing my lips to his hair. "No, baby. Not while I'm here," but inside, I wasn't sure. Karen had made her threat clear they'd be back, this time with papers and power. I opened my laptop, hands trembling, and started searching. Custody laws, emergency protective orders, HOA legal limits. Everything blurred together in a sea of legal jargon, words I didn't understand but knew I had to. My son played quietly on the floor, stacking blocks, his innocence untouched for. Now, but the clock was ticking. Then my phone buzzed. David's name lit up the screen. My chest tightened with relief as I answered. His voice was clipped, all business, but beneath it, I could hear the storm brewing. I put in for immediate emergency leave. Command approved it. I'll be on a plane tomorrow. Tomorrow. It's one more day. I just had to hold on one more day. David. I whispered, fighting the sob in my throat. They're going to try again. She said she'll get a court order. They won't stop. Then let them try, he said, his tone steel. I don't care what paper they wave around. No one takes my son. No one threatens my family. I closed my eyes, letting his strength wash over me. What do I do until then? Stay inside. Keep the doors locked. Don't answer to anyone but me. And sir, if they try to force their way in again, call me immediately. Do not give them an inch. The rest of the day passed in a haze of tension. Every knock outside, every passing car made my chest tighten. I drew the blinds, unplugged the doorbell, and kept my son near me at all times. We played board games. Baked cookies, tried to pretend like it was a normal day, but I saw the fear in his eyes every time he heard a noise outside. His childhood was being poisoned by this nightmare. By late afternoon, the inevitable happened. A white SUV pulled into the driveway. My heart sank as Karen stepped out, heels clicking on the pavement, papers clutched in her hand. 2 uniformed men followed, private security, not police, but armed all the same. She wasn't even hiding her arrogance now. She strutted up the walkway like she already owned the place. I pulled my son behind me as the knock rattled the door. "Mrs. Ashford," Karen's voice rang out, sickly sweet. "We have legal authorization to remove the child from unsafe conditions. Open up and make this easy on yourself." My chest heaved. "You're lying," I shouted through the door, clutching my son's trembling hand. "You don't have anything real. Get off my property." A pause. Then her voice hardened, dripping with malice. "You can't hide forever. The HOA rules are clear. Children must be raised in a safe, orderly environment. And clearly, you aren't capable of that. The board agrees." The board. My stomach churned. This wasn't just Karen anymore. She had rallied others, twisting the rules, weaponizing the very system meant to keep peace in the neighborhood. "Mom." My son whimpered, pressing his face into my side. My blood boiled. She had already taken his peace of mind. I would not let her take him. I said, "Get off my property." My voice cracked, but I stood tall, forcing strength I didn't feel. "You step foot in this house and I'll have you arrested for trespassing." Karen laughed. Actually laughed. "Sweetheart, I am the law here. But if you want to play that way, fine. We'll let the real authorities handle it. Enjoy your last night with him." Her heels clicked back down the steps. The SUV doors slammed. Then they were gone. But her words lingered like poison in the air. Last night with him, I sank to the floor, clutching my son, rocking him back and forth as tears streamed down my face. I whispered over and over, "I won't let them take you. I won't. I promise." That night, sleep didn't come. I sat awake on the couch with a baseball bat across my lap, listening to every creak, every rustle of the wind. My son slept restlessly, crying out in his dreams. I had never felt so helpless. Then at 3 a.m., my phone buzzed again. David's voice came through, low but steady. "We landed. I'll be home in 6 hours." Relief washed over me so strong it nearly knocked me over. "David, she came today. With papers. With security. She said it was my last night with him." Silence. Then his voice dropped into something I'd only heard when he talked. About combat, cold, dangerous. Then tomorrow is her last day pulling this stunt. They want war. They just picked the wrong Marine. When I hung up, I looked toward my son's room, the faint glow of his nightlight flickering through the crack in the door. I wiped my tears, gripping the bat tighter. For the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel alone because my husband was coming home, and tomorrow, this war with the HOA would begin for real. The morning David came home, the air felt electric. I barely slept, my body running on adrenaline alone, but I was alive with something I hadn't felt in weeks' hope. My son sat at the kitchen table, his cereal untouched, his eyes darting to the window every few seconds. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he knew one thing: Dad was coming back. When the sound of a car engine rumbled into the driveway, my son bolted upright. I rushed to the window, heart pounding. The black SUV pulled in, and before it even stopped moving, the door swung open. David stepped out, tall and broad, still in uniform, his eyes sharp as steel. For a second, time froze. Then my son tore across the room, threw open the front door, and ran into his father's arms. "Daddy!" His little voice cracked with relief. David scooped him up, holding him so tightly I thought he might never let go. His jaw was clenched, his eyes burning, but his hands trembled slightly as they gripped our son. This was the man who had stared down enemies in war zones. But this was different. This was personal. I stepped outside, tears blurring my vision. David looked at me over our son's shoulder. His gaze softened for a moment, then hardened again as he scanned the street. "They came to our home?" he asked, quietly, his voice like a storm ready to break. I nodded, my throat tight. "They were inside. They tried to take him, David. Karen, she won't stop." He set our son down gently, kissed the top of his head, then turned to me. "Not anymore. She just picked the fight of her life." Inside, David dropped his duffel by the door and began pacing the living room. He wasn't shouting, but his energy filled the house like a battle drum. "I've dealt with insurgents, cartels, and warlords," he said, his voice cold, controlled. "And I'll tell you something. Bullies are the same everywhere. They push until they meet someone who pushes back harder. Karen thinks she runs this place. She thinks her HOA rules are law. But she doesn't understand there's a line you don't cross. And she crossed it the second she came for my son." I watched him, equal parts relieved and terrified. I had wanted him home so badly, but now I realized David wasn't coming home to rest. He was coming home to fight. The first step he took was calling his attorney, a fellow Marine veteran who owed him favors. Within hours, we had paperwork drafted, restraining orders in motion. Legal firepower aimed right back at the HOA. But David wasn't just playing defense. He was strategizing, moving like a commander, preparing his unit. He made phone calls, contacted state agencies, pulled every string he had. By noon, word spread that David was back. And with it came the storm. Karen showed up. Of course, she couldn't resist. She marched down the sidewalk in her designer blazer, clutching a folder stuffed with papers. Her lips curled in that smug smile I hated more than anything. This time, though, she wasn't alone. 3 board members followed, their faces tight. With false confidence, David stood on the porch waiting, his posture straight, his arms folded across his chest. He looked like a wall of granite, immovable. I stood just behind him, my son clutching my hand. "Commander Ashford," Karen sneered. As if his title was an insult. "Back so soon? Good. Then you can face the truth directly. Your wife is unfit. The board has ruled, and we have legal backing to remove the child from this toxic environment." She thrust the papers at him like a weapon. David didn't even glance at them. He stepped down one stair, closing the distance between them. His voice was calm, but the steel in it made every word slice through the air. "You sent armed men to my home. You terrified my wife. You tried to steal my son in the middle of the night. And now you come here thinking you can intimidate me with paperwork?" Karen faltered, just slightly, but tried to recover. "This community has standards. This community," David cut her off, his voice rising, "does not own my family. My son is not your bargaining chip. And if you think for one second that your little HOA rules outweigh the United States Constitution or a federal Marine commander's rights, you're more delusional than I thought." Her face flushed crimson. The board members shifted nervously behind her. Neighbors peeked from their windows, watching the confrontation unfold like a live show. "You can't threaten us," Karen snapped, but her voice wavered. "I don't." "Threaten," David said, stepping closer, towering over her. "I promise. And here's my promise to you, Karen. If you ever come near my wife or my son again, I will dismantle this HOA piece by piece until it's nothing but ashes. Expose every shady deal, every misuse of funds, every abuse of power. You want a war? You just got one. And I don't lose wars." The silence that followed was thick. Karen's smirk had vanished. Her eyes darted to the board members, but none of them spoke. For the first time, she wasn't in control. Finally, she sputtered, "You'll regret this." "No," David said, his voice like a gavel slamming down. "You will." She turned on her heel, her heels clicking furiously as she stormed back. Down the street, the board members scurrying after her. When they were gone, David finally exhaled, running a hand down his face. He turned to me, his expression softening. He reached for our son, pulling him into his arms again. "They won't touch you," he whispered, pressing his forehead against his boy's. "Not while I'm here." I swallowed hard, my eyes stinging. With tears, for the first time in weeks, I felt truly safe. But I also knew this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the kind of woman to walk away quietly. And as I looked at my husband, Marine commander who had just declared war on the HOA, I realized something chilling. The real battle hadn't even started yet. For 2 blessed days, there was silence. No knocks on the door, no flashing lights in the driveway, no poison-laced letters stuffed in our mailbox. My son even started laughing again, chasing the dog in the backyard while David grilled burgers on the porch. For a brief moment, it almost felt normal, like the nightmare had been just a bad dream. But deep down, we all knew it wasn't over. Karen Blake was not the kind of woman to lick her wounds quietly. She was planning her next strike. and David was preparing for it. I watched him from the kitchen window as he stood in the yard, phone pressed to his ear, his posture rigid. He wasn't just making calls, he was building an army. Former Marines, legal advisors, friends in law enforcement. He was pulling every string he had. The weight of his network was beginning to shift against the HOA. That night, as I tucked our son into bed, he looked at me with wide eyes. "Mom, is Daddy going to win?" The question lodged in my throat. I wanted to say yes, to promise it, but promises had become fragile things in this war. Still, I smiled, brushing the hair from his forehead. "Your daddy always wins," I whispered, kissing him goodnight. Downstairs, David sat at the table surrounded by files, printouts, and a laptop glowing with documents. "She's been siphoning HOA funds," he muttered, his jaw clenched. "Thousands gone. Fake invoices. Payments to shell companies. I knew she was dirty, but this is criminal." My breath caught. "You can prove it." "Oh, I can prove it," he said, eyes hard. "And when I do, she won't just lose her position, she'll lose everything." The next morning, we got our answer. Karen struck back. I was pouring coffee when the sound of tires screeched outside. I looked out the window and froze. 2 police cruisers sat in the driveway, lights flashing. My stomach dropped. My son ran in, panicked, and David was already moving toward the door. His shoulders squared. The knock was sharp, official. An officer's voice boomed, "Commander Ashford, we have a warrant for your arrest." The world tilted under my feet. "What?" I gasped, my coffee mug slipping from my hands and shattering on the floor. David opened the door calmly, but his eyes were blazing. "On what grounds?" he demanded. Karen's voice drifted from behind the officers like nails on a chalkboard. She stepped into view, smug as ever. "On grounds of domestic violence and child endangerment. I've submitted sworn statements and witness testimony." My knees nearly buckled. "What? That's a lie." I shouted. Karen smiled, her lipstick-perfect mouth curling with triumph. "The courts will decide." One of the officers looked uncomfortable, glancing between David's calm, commanding figure and Karen's venomous grin. "Sir, we're just doing our job. You'll have to come with us." My son screamed, clinging to David's leg. "No, don't take my daddy. Please." His cries tore me apart. David crouched, holding our boy's face in his hands. His voice was steady, but I could see the storm raging in his eyes. "Listen to me, son. Look at me. Daddy's not going anywhere forever. This is just a game they're playing, and games don't last. You be strong for Mommy, okay?" Tears streamed down our son's face as David stood, placing his wrists calmly in front of him. The officers hesitated before cuffing him, clearly uneasy, but Karen's presence pushed them forward. She looked directly at me as they led him away, her smile sharp as glass. "I told you, you can't win against me." I stood frozen, my son wailing in my arms, as the cruisers pulled away with my husband inside. The house felt hollow that night, his absence a gaping wound. My son wouldn't let go of his stuffed bear, crying himself to sleep in my lap. I sat there in the dark, rocking him, rage and despair churning inside me. Karen had gone too far. She wasn't just threatening us anymore. She was destroying us, but David's words echoed in my mind. Games don't last. The next morning, I called the attorney David had lined up. He was already moving, filing motions demanding immediate review of the so-called evidence. He assured me they've overplayed their hand. Commander Ashford won't be locked up long, and he was right. Less than 24 hours later, David walked back through our door, unshackled, his uniform neat, his eyes burning with fury. He hugged our son tight, kissed me hard, then pulled us both close. "They tried to break me," he said softly. But they don't know who they're dealing with. Karen thinks she won. No, she just signed her own death warrant. What do we do now? I asked, my voice shaking. David's jaw set like iron. We go on the offensive. No more hiding. No more defense. If she wants a war, I'll give her one she'll never forget. The next week was chaos. Karen paraded around the neighborhood, spreading lies about us, rallying her little army of board members, flaunting her temporary victory. But behind closed doors, David was dismantling her empire piece by piece. He gathered financial records, witness testimonies, photographs, videos. Every shred of corruption she had tried to bury, he dragged into the light. And then came the bombshell. David uncovered proof that Karen had been using HOA funds to pay for her own luxury vacations, car upgrades, even private security. Tens of thousands of dollars, all stolen from the community she claimed to protect. When David showed me the evidence, my breath caught. This could destroy her. His eyes hardened. It will. That night, as I watched him preparing his case, a realization settled over me. Karen had tried to steal my son, tried to frame my husband, tried to shatter our family. But instead, she had awakened something far stronger than she could ever handle. She had awakened a Marine commander who knew how to fight battles and win them. And this time, the battlefield was our neighborhood. The courthouse was packed that morning. Neighbors filled every seat. Reporters stood at the back. And even people from outside the town had come after hearing about the scandal. Everyone wanted to see the showdown between our family and the HOA. My hands trembled slightly as I held Jason's hand, his little fingers squeezing mine with more strength than I expected. He wasn't afraid anymore. He had seen the truth that his dad wasn't just a Marine commander, but a man who would burn the world to protect his son. Karen sat across the aisle with her attorney, smug as ever. She looked polished, wearing a stiff blazer, her chin tilted up like she was untouchable. But there was something in her eyes, an edge of panic she tried to hide under her fake confidence. The HOA board sat beside her, some pale, others whispering nervously. They knew this wasn't just a hearing. This was exposure. The judge walked in, a stern man who commanded silence the moment he stepped through the door. His gaze scanned the room before landing on us, then Karen. The bailiff announced the case, and the trial began. The HOA's lawyer went first. He painted us as troublemakers who refused to follow community rules. He twisted the story, claiming Jason had been wandering unsafely and the HOA had acted out of concern. My stomach churned at the lies. Jason looked at me, eyes wide with confusion, as if he couldn't understand how grown adults could lie so easily. Then it was our turn. Our lawyer, a calm but fierce woman named Amanda, stood tall. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Every word cut through the air like a blade. This is not about community rules. This is about abuse of power. This is about a mother and father whose child was ripped from their home by people who had no legal right to touch him. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as she laid out the evidence, the 911 call, the body cam footage of cops acting under HOA pressure, emails between Karen and the board discussing how to teach the family a lesson. And then came the video security footage showing the night they took Jason, his small body crying as strangers dragged him away. My heart twisted seeing it again, but this time it wasn't just us watching. It was the whole town. Karen shifted uncomfortably, her mask cracking. People in the audience whispered, some glaring at her, others shaking their heads in disbelief. The judge leaned forward, his face hard as stone. And then, the moment that broke everything open, John stood. He had been silent most of the trial, letting the lawyers do their work. But now, he walked to the front, his uniform jacket pressed, his medals gleaming. When he spoke, his voice shook the room. I am a U.S. Marine commander. I have fought For this country, bled for this country, and watched men give their lives for freedom and justice. And yet, in my own neighborhood, a group of people thought they could kidnap my son to enforce their control. I've faced enemies overseas, but I never thought I'd face cowards like this at home. The room erupted. Some people clapped before. The judge slammed his gavel for silence, but the damage was done. Karen's smugness was gone. She was pale now, her lips trembling. She tried to whisper to her lawyer, but the lawyer shook his head, defeat written all over his face. Then came the final blow. Amanda produced one last piece of evidence, recorded voicemail from Karen herself. Her voice rang out across the courtroom. That kid needs to be taken out of their hands. His father thinks being a Marine makes him untouchable. We'll show him who's in charge here. The courtroom exploded with noise. Reporters scribbled furiously, neighbors gasped, and even the judge's jaw clenched. Karen tried to protest, yelling that it was fake, but it was too late. Everyone had heard it. Everyone knew the truth. The judge's ruling was swift and merciless. The HOA was fined heavily. Karen was stripped of her HOA presidency effective immediately and faced criminal charges for conspiracy and child endangerment. The cops who participated faced disciplinary action and possible termination. The HOA board was dissolved, and control of the community was transferred to an independent management company. But for us, the real victory wasn't just the legal win. It was the moment we walked out of that courthouse, Jason between us, as neighbors clapped and cheered. People we had never spoken to before came up to shake John's hand, to hug me, to pat Jason's shoulder. The fear that had hung over us for months was gone. That night, back at home, Jason curled up beside me on the couch. "Mom," he whispered, "are they gone for good?" I kissed his forehead and looked into his tired little eyes. "Yes, sweetheart, they're gone, and they'll never hurt us again." John stood behind us, his hand resting on my shoulder. His eyes softened, though the Marine in him never fully relaxed. He had fought battles on foreign soil, but this protecting his family from people who thought they could play gods with. Power this had been his hardest fight, and he had won. But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't the type to just disappear quietly. People like her never accepted defeat. They plotted. They waited. And as much as I wanted to believe it was over, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that she would try to crawl back into our lives one last time. The storm had passed. Up. Maybe, just maybe, a darker one was still coming. For weeks after the trial, life finally felt normal again. The air around our home didn't feel heavy anymore. Neighbors waved when they saw us. Jason ran freely in the yard without fear, and John actually smiled more often than I had seen in years. For the first time, our house felt like a home again. Not a battlefield, but deep down, I couldn't shake the unease that lingered like a shadow in the corners of my mind. People like Karen didn't just fade away. They lived off control, off. Winning and losing, publicly losing everything, wasn't something she could stomach. I was proven right one stormy Friday night. Rain battered the windows, the wind howled through the trees, and Jason had already gone to bed. I was folding laundry in the living room when headlights cut across the curtains. A car had pulled into our driveway. John, who had been cleaning, his rifle at the kitchen table, looked up immediately, instincts on high alert. The knock on the door was sharp, urgent. I froze, fear prickling up my arms. John motioned for me to stay back and opened the door just enough to see outside. There she was. Karen, her makeup smeared from the rain, her eyes wild. "You ruined my life," she spat, her voice shaking. "You think you won? This isn't over. You don't get to destroy me and walk away." John's jaw tightened. His voice was calm, low, the kind of tone I'd only heard when he was on the edge of dangerous. "Karen, leave. Now, before you. Do something you can't come back from." But she stepped forward, her body trembling with rage. "They fired me. My husband left me. My friends won't even answer my calls. You made me a joke in this town. You think your medals make you untouchable? You're nothing. Nothing." I had never seen John move so fast. He stepped out into the rain, towering over her, his presence enough to make even trained soldiers hesitate. "You laid a hand on my son," he said, his voice cutting like a blade. "That was your mistake. That was your line. And now you're standing here, on my property, trying to threaten my family again. Don't test me." For a second, silence hung heavy. Lightning flashed, illuminating Karen's face, twisted with hate, but cracked with desperation. She looked like a woman who had lost everything and was trying to grab at any scrap of power left. And then she snapped. She screamed, lunged forward, her fists pounding against John's chest as if she could break him. But he didn't flinch. He didn't even raise a hand. He just stood there, letting her anger wash over him like rain. Finally, he caught her wrists in his hands and held them still. His voice was steady, commanding, final. "You're done, Karen. You lost. And the only reason I don't have you arrested right now is because my son is sleeping inside and doesn't need to see you dragged away in handcuffs again. Leave this town. Leave us. If you ever come near my family again, there won't be a courtroom to save you." Her face crumpled. The fight drained from her body all at once, replaced by something far sadder: emptiness. She pulled back, her shoulders sagging, tears mixing with the rain. Without another word, she stumbled back to her car and drove off into the night. I stood in the doorway, my heart pounding, tears streaming down my face. John stepped back inside, closing the door gently behind him. He didn't speak at first, just wrapped his arms around me, pulling me tight against his chest. I could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong. "It's over," he whispered finally. "She's gone." And this time, I believed him. The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds, casting light over our neighborhood. People walked there. Dogs, kids rode their bikes, and life went on. But something had shifted, not just in our family, but in the entire community. The HOA was gone, its grip broken. Neighbors began helping one another instead of policing one another. Gardens bloomed, laughter echoed, and for the first time in years, peace settled over us all. Jason came running into the kitchen that morning, holding a crayon drawing in his hand. "Look, Daddy," he said proudly, "it's us. You're the hero, Mommy's the heart, and I'm the strong one." John knelt down, taking the drawing in his hands. His tough marine exterior cracked as his eyes welled with tears. "No, son," he said softly. "You're the reason we fight. You're the reason we're strong." And in that moment, as Jason wrapped his little arms around his father's neck, I realized something. Revenge hadn't been the real victory. It wasn't about destroying Karen or the HOA, or even proving ourselves right. The real victory was here, in our home. In the love that had survived the storm, we were a family. Untouchable, unbreakable, and no HOA. No corrupt cops, no bitter neighbor would ever take that from us again. The war was over, and we had won.